This dog looked every day into a sewer. When they finally opened it, people were surprised to see what was inside. In many countries, stray dogs are something common, but it was one in particular that fascinated people because of its actions. In Turkey, formerly called Turkey, a furry and dirty stray puppy walked down the street, something he usually did daily while scavenging for any food or water he could find. The day had started normally, with the animal trotting happily down the street, wagging his tail at anyone who looked at him. Despite living on the streets, he was very friendly and loved receiving pettings from people. While walking down a particular street, suddenly he smelled something delicious. He followed his nose until he found himself in front of a butcher shop, looking through the window display. The dog watched as customers bought large chops of meat for their dinner. Just by looking at the food, he realized how hungry he was, and his stomach let out a loud growl. Inside the shop, a young woman named Annie was finishing paying for a couple of large steaks. Once she finished, she thanked the butcher and left the shop. Outside, Annie began walking down the street toward her home when she heard a noise and a whimper. The confused young woman turned around only to see the stray dog looking at her with very sad eyes. Once again, the dog's stomach growled. Annie then knew what the problem was. The dog was clearly a stray and very hungry. Annie immediately felt bad for him. She looked at the steak she had bought, went back into the butcher shop, and asked the butcher for some scraps or leftovers he wouldn't sell. The butcher gave the woman what she wanted. Annie went out and looked around for the dog. She soon found him watching her from a distance. The woman crouched down and carefully held out the bone she had gotten for him. At first, the animal was cautious and didn't want to get too close to the woman, but the more time she held out the food, the less he resisted approaching to get it. Finally, Annie managed to earn the trust of this dog enough for him to start wagging his tail and accept the big bone. But instead of eating the food right then, the dog took it and began walking away, as if he had somewhere to go. Confused by the reaction but not wanting to question it, Annie simply got up and headed back home. The next day, the girl again walked the same route when she noticed the same dog. He seemed to notice her presence and happily approached, wagging his tail. Annie smiled at the dog's enthusiasm for her and began to pet him. Sadly, the young woman had to go somewhere, so she couldn't spend much time with the animal. However, before leaving, she made sure to buy him some sausages from a nearby store. But once again, the dog didn't eat them right away and walked off again. Annie was curious about the animal's behavior but didn't have time to follow him and had to continue with her tasks. On the third day, Annie again came across the same animal, only this time it seemed like he was waiting for her. By that time, the girl had started carrying treats in her purse, hoping to give them to the poor stray. She approached the dog and gave them to him. But this time, when the dog turned around and walked away, Annie began to follow him. They reached a very busy street, and Annie saw how the furry dog headed toward a sewer and then sat there and looked down. He dropped one of the treats Annie had given him into it before eating his own. The young woman was confused. What was the dog doing? Over the next few days, Annie found the animal sitting and looking at that drain. Every time she gave him some food, he would drop half into the sewer before eating his share. Eventually, Annie's curiosity grew, so she decided to take a look for herself. She wanted to know what was hiding in the sewer, but what she found surprised her. The girl quietly approached the drain, tired of seeing the dog standing guard next to it. But the dog just watched her curiously. Once she was directly above the sewer, she looked down and was left speechless at what she saw. Immediately, the young woman took out her phone and called the fire department, as she would definitely need their help. About half an hour later, a couple of firefighters arrived and asked the woman what was going on. Annie explained what she had seen, and the men quickly got to work. They approached the drain, but at that moment, the stray dog began to growl at them. And since they didn't want to be bitten, the firefighters stopped. They didn't know what to do, but luckily Annie carefully approached the animal, assuring him the men were only there to help. Then she offered him a treat, and when he finally came to take it, she held him back to move him away from the drain and the firefighters. With the dog out of the way, the firefighters got to work to open the sewer. And since it was in the middle of a busy street, a crowd formed around the firefighters to see what they were doing. After a few tense minutes, the men finally revealed what the stray dog had been focused on. In one of the firefighters' arms was a small kitten. All the passers-by were amazed, but that wasn't the end. The firefighter went back into the sewer 4 more times, and each time he came out, there was another kitten in his arms. Annie was astonished by what she was witnessing. She knew there was something down there because she had looked earlier, but she had no idea there were 5 small and adorable kittens. At that moment, the stray dog managed to escape Annie's arms and approached the men who had the kittens. As soon as the dog saw them, he immediately began wagging his tail and sniffing them. The kittens meowed back at the dog and seemed to want him close. Annie approached the firefighters and asked how the kittens had ended up in such a situation. The firefighter told her they had probably been washed into the drain during a heavy rain, but considering they had been trapped there, it was a miracle they weren't starving. Upon hearing this, Annie looked at the stray dog. She knew the kittens had survived thanks to him sharing his food with them every day. Seeing such an incredible selfless act, Annie knew what she wanted to do next. She told the firefighters that she would take the kittens home to raise them until they were ready to be rehomed. The firefighters agreed and handed them over. The young woman headed home before turning and calling to the stray dog. "Come on, let's go home," she said. The dog came to her happily. Annie took care of the kittens and found a loving home for 4 of them once they were old enough to move out. She kept one for herself because she loved them so much. Also, Benny finally had a home of his own, since Annie had fallen in love with the furry dog and couldn't bear to leave him on the street after what he had done for the little felines. The family lived happily together, with neither Fox the cat nor Benny worried about ending up on the streets again, because Annie loved them too much, and they loved her just as much. What an adorable story! Let me know what you thought in the comments, and don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with more incredible life stories. Musical note: